Good to see you. Good morning, Richard.
Good morning. Morning.
Good morning, Richard. Nice to meet you. Good morning. How are you?
You can be seated, please. Before we start this congressional hearing, let me introduce our panel. My name is Dan Boggs, and I'm the United States Attorney for the District of Nevada. To my left is 8th Judicial Court District Court Judge Alyssa Kadish. And to my right is United States Magistrate Judge William Hoffman. And to his right is Justice of the Peace Scott Pearson. If we could have each of our panelists introduce themselves, please.
I'm Catherine Bandy. I'm Tess Opperman.
Austin Smith. I'm Kendall Berger.
Thank you very much. We will start this panel. The question for you is, the First Amendment, with its protection of freedom of speech and press, has been described as being at the heart of American democracy. Do you agree or disagree with that description? Why or why not? Your sub-questions would be, why is the right to freedom of expression important to the individual and to the society as a whole? And under what circumstances, if any, are limitations on freedom of speech and press consistent with the intent of the First Amendment, and why? Reno, start.
Stated in the mid-20th century by Minnesota Congressman Walter H. Judd, people often say that in a democracy, decisions are made by a majority of the people. Of course, that is not true. Decisions are made by a majority of the people who make themselves heard. We agree, at the heart of American democracy are the freedoms of speech and press because they enable individuals to express themselves and advocate for societal change.
In 1734, John Peter Zenger published a newspaper that publicly denounced the royal governor of New York. The court ruled the truth cannot be liable, and Zenger was proven innocent. This colonial case set an early precedent that an individual's voice shall be censored for light and transient reasons.
The founders' intention behind the First Amendment was to create a government in which the people are free to express themselves and thus actively participate in government. Drawing from Cato's letter number 15, where a man cannot call his tongue his own, he can scarce call anything else his own. The founders included the First Amendment to allow the people to own their words and their beliefs, and consequently own their government.
In 1931, the freedoms of speech and press were questioned in Minnesota, where a law was passed which prevented the publication of malicious or scandalous material as directed at John Muir's newspaper, the Saturday Press. However, the Supreme Court sided with Muir, ruling that although the information was defamatory of local officials, it increased societal awareness of local government shortcomings and was thus constitutional.
In 1970, the Supreme Court ruled in New York Times, the United States, the only free and unrestrained press can effectively expose despotism in government, as the press was to serve the governed, not the governors.
Following these ideas, the ability to express oneself is key to individual and societal liberty and progression of society as a whole through evolution of new perspectives, articulated by Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes in the 1919 Abrams case. The best test of truth is the power of one's thought to get itself accepted into the competition of the market.
Nonverbal speech, originally established in the 1969 Tinker case, was expanded 20 years later by the case Texas v. Johnson, in which Justice William Brennan stated, "The government may not prohibit the expression of an idea simply because society finds the idea itself offensive or disagreeable."
However, limitations on freedom of speech and press are consistent with the intention of the First Amendment because they guard against the subversion of government and prevent infringement on another's rights. Written by Sue Leeson, Oregon State Supreme Court Justice, liberty is not licensed to do anything one pleases. In some situations, limiting freedom to speak may actually increase a person's ability to be heard. All of the actions of the Ku Klux Klan in Brandenburg, Ohio were ruled constitutional. The court decided that speech meant to provoke imminent lawless action was not protected by the First Amendment.
Times of war necessitate for the limitations on speech and press. In 1919, Charles Schneck was persecuted under the Espionage Act. The court ruled the words used are used in such circumstances to create a clear and present danger that will bring about the substantive evils that Congress has a right to prevent. In 1967, the O'Brien decision established that speech may be censored if it furthers an important or substantial government interest.
First Amendment freedoms must also be limited in schools in order to maintain a positive learning environment for all students. Articulated in the Hazelwood v. Kohlmeyer case of 1988, a school need not tolerate student speech that is inconsistent with its basic educational mission. These restrictions on speech and press uphold the original intent of the First Amendment by allowing the government to do what is necessary to protect its citizens and preserve the common good.
In the First Amendment stands a core fundamental value of the United States, the freedom to voice an opinion and participate in American democracy. Although at times limitations are imposed upon these rights, they are necessary for strict adherence to the founders' original intent.
As Thomas Jefferson said to Madison at the House debate on June 8, 1789, "The people shall not be deprived or abridged of their right to speak, to write, or to publish their sentiments, and the freedom of the press, as one of the great bulwarks of liberty, shall be inviolable." Thank you.
Rena, we appreciate your prepared statements. There will be follow-on questions. Those will be addressed to you by Judge Kadish.
Okay, so you started to address this a little bit, but I want to hear you talk a little more about what forms of expression typically fall outside the protection of the First Amendment and why?
The most common forms of expression that fall outside of the First Amendment are speech when it comes to libel and seditious acts, and also in regards to obscenity.
Other limitations often take place in school. In our testimony, we spoke of the Hazelwood case, which stated that schools need not tolerate student speech that is inconsistent with its basic educational mission. So this is seen in cases like Morse versus Frederick, where a student held a sign that said "Mom hits for Jesus," and because this message didn't increase the mission of the school and the educational messages, it was ruled unconstitutional.
Expanding off what my colleague Catherine said in terms of hate speech, in Brandenburg v. Ohio, it was ruled that speech is protected and deserves First Amendment protection unless it provokes imminent lawless action. And because of that, hate speech is protected to an extent. However, libel and sedition, as my colleague said, are not protected by the First Amendment.
And do you agree with having those limitations of the First Amendment for, something that might incite lawless action?
Certainly, as it upholds the common good and it protects the general public.
Judge Huffman?
There is something new that's developed over the last decade or so. It is the internet, the Facebook, Twitter, these other forms of communication. Do these new forms of communication give rise to new First Amendment issues?
Well, yes. The Facebook allows for people to express great means of expression by allowing them to get together on an individual basis from their homes and talk about government issues. Mark Zuckerberg stated, at a core value, Americans want to find ways to express themselves. And what he is saying is, people are always trying to find ways to express themselves through the internet and other means. And the internet just allows for people to gather as one on an individual basis to talk civilly and participate in civil discourse.
Is it significant to you that the communications on the internet and other places can be anonymous? And what's the impact of that?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Is it significant in light of the fact that we have a wonderful communications capability on the internet and other ways? Oftentimes that communication can be anonymous. You don't know who sent the message. What's the impact of that, and how should Congress act? Should they decide to make a rule about limiting or allowing the anonymous communication through the internet?
Well, the Stop Online Piracy Act, SOPA, was going through Congress, and Google made a petition online, which 7 million people signed the petition, and this is the largest ever created on the internet petition-wise. And this just shows that America wants and needs to participate and show civil discourse, whether it's anonymous, because you can filter things out with the use of schools and knowledge of that.
Anonymous doings on the internet should not be allowed. In Citizens United versus FEC, we see what anonymity has done to our society in terms of elections, and that is further propagated by the use of the internet. If people are unable to declare themselves and thus own their words, as Cato said, then their words lose validity, and
scathing remarks, and in essence violate the incision doctrine. But because we don't know who's saying these remarks, the decision upheld in Brandenburg v. Ohio is no longer applicable to sites such as Facebook and other internet sites.
Very good. You answered my follow-up. No, that was very well done. With regards to another question I'll ask you, the Supreme Court generally protects political speech, including expressions that fall outside of the mainstream and of political thought. Why do you think political communication receives such special treatment?
Political communication receives so much liberty, I suppose, because that was the founders' intention. The founders wanted freedom of speech so that the common people could speak out against their government and advocate for their rights and stick up for their society. And that is why we have decisions in Texas v. Johnson. While society may disagree with the actions that the individual took, the actions must be permissible, because if those rights begin to be taken away, where is the line drawn? When do we lose our liberty?
The parliamentary system, under the original parliamentary system, individuals were not able to speak out against their government, and they didn't have this freedom of voice. So when the founders created our government, like my colleague stated, they really wanted to give the citizens the ability to address the government and reprieve its errors. So the freedom of speech, and especially in political speech, is extremely important because it goes directly with the intention of the First Amendment.
And political speech can be as simple as something as expressing your ideas on something. As seen in the Reagan administration when Brandenburg v. Ohio took place, just burning the flag is symbolic speech, which is thus political speech.
All right, thank you.
Increasingly, polls show that the public is choosing its news medium based on ideological preference. Is that a healthy thing or an unhealthy thing? And tell me why.
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, increasingly, polls show that the public is choosing its news medium based on ideological preferences. People watch Fox News, people watch CBS, people watch ABC. Is that a healthy or an unhealthy development? Tell me why.
I think it's incredibly unhealthy, especially with how biased our media has become recently, and with the sunsetting of the Fairness Doctrine in 1985. Because of that, since the news bias is so prevalent in today's society and the slant is so prevalent, how can people determine what is true and what is false, especially when everyone seems to be contradicting themselves? So I think it goes against our society as a whole and democracy as a whole, as we are unable to truly know what is happening in our government and with the issues and how our candidates feel about them.
An incredibly powerful right in America is the ability to vote. Nearly every citizen has the freedom to vote. However, to make this vote, it's most important to have an educated opinion and knowing all sides of the candidates and understanding the issues. However, with the polarization of the political field and in terms of news stations and other media, choosing one group over another, individuals cannot get a true education and are therefore no longer voting with an educated guess and knowledge of the issues and candidates.
So where else can the public go to get that information about those candidates?
Well, the internet, although there's some information that's misleading, there are great websites that show this. For example, wallstreetjournal.com is or .org, I believe, is an awesome website to go to find information on recent politics, recent news, current events, all that stuff. And as long as people know which websites are viable and which websites you shouldn't be reading because they could be made by anyone, as long as they figure that part out, they should get their information that they want, which is true.
Do you think there's anything that the government could or should do to address the fact that people are kind of going in different directions in terms of what media they listen to, or any role for the government in that?
Citizens United needs to be repealed. Citizens United is so derailing of our democratic system because anonymity is allowed and because the election itself loses integrity. That was discussed in McConnell v. FEC and in Buckley v. Vallejo, where the integrity of the election was so important, and that's why we limited money, and that's why we limited that freedom of speech through funds. We need to do it once again with repealing Citizens United.
Pamphlets could be sent out to individuals from the government. The New York Times often posts unbiased comparisons of candidates so that you have a good understanding of where each candidate stands on the issues. The government could similarly send out pamphlets and news slips on comparisons of the different candidates so that people have a clear understanding of the issues.
Thank you very much, Reno. This congressional hearing is closed. We're going to reverse, and as far as critique on your presentations, we'll start with Judge Pearson.
Well, great job. You guys obviously demonstrated a very deep level of understanding of this topic area. You had a passion that came through clearly about this. Part of the reason we chose this question is we thought you might have a passion for it. You did a good job supporting each other, but also disagreed respectfully with each other, taking both sides of the issue is obviously very important, at least to understand for your argument. The only critique I could give you would be, this historic issue in speech presentations is the reading. It's just not quite as effective. You guys are far more effective when you're making that eye contact, you're speaking passionately, moving your hands a bit at times. It's just far more effective than when you were reading in your earlier presentation. But other than that, you guys did just a fantastic job, especially it came out in those follow-up questions and your use of authority and current examples. Good job.
Judge Hoffman?
Yeah, I would piggyback onto that idea. There is a difference between the initial presentation, which is constructed in your mind, and it is that the substance is good. Deliver that substance with the same enthusiasm as you delivered the other answers. So those other answers there was a difference from my point of view on how you had thought about those questions and then tried to persuade. Both sets of discussions should be persuasive. And even though you know what you're going to say, there's no reason that you wouldn't deliver it with the same sort of deliberate presentation as you did at the end as you were thinking about how to present it. That advocacy is advocacy whether it's at the beginning or at the end, so take your time on it.
Judge Kadish?
Yes, you guys did a wonderful job. It's one thing to read the history books and learn about history, but really the value is then to be able to apply that to new situations that come up, and you came up with some modern examples, pulled in some different things that weren't part of the prepared remarks, and that was impressive. And it's important for you to, even in this context and in life, to have your opinion about it and be willing to express it, and that was good that you guys did that. Just because the Supreme Court says something doesn't necessarily mean they're right, and you can disagree with them. Now, what you do about it from there is another issue. But I really appreciated the level of your analysis and enthusiasm for the subject matter. I hope you continue that participation as a citizen and vote and participate on juries and all of that.
I think that was an outstanding presentation. Things really picked up when the follow-on questions came up, and that's usually the most difficult process. I mean, it's one thing to have something set up and prepared for 4 minutes and make that presentation. It's something else when you suddenly get hit with questions and we go in different areas of the subject matter that you're going to be discussing. And I think that's where you really came through. I appreciated the fact that everybody participated. Questions came down, we heard from each of the panelists. And as several of the judges have noted, your abilities to go back to some of the case law and some of the precedents that you learned and apply some of the answers that you gave was outstanding. It was a very good presentation, and I know our panel was very impressed with Reno.
Thank you.
Well done, good luck.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.